From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here on a Monday. I'm back after a week off. It's good to be here. I hope you stayed with us through some of our evergreen shows from last week, but now we're back with a live program for you this morning. Invite you, as always, to join in the conversation. You know, while I was out of town this past week, the city of Nashville, like many other communities around the country, frankly, finally, shall we say, reopened to a degree to what it was in the past. Masks, and from what I understand, the crowds at the Sounds game and downtown and everywhere, booming. And it's even affected us here in studio. We continue to maintain some distance, okay? And I wear a mask when I come into the station, but take it off when I go about my business. But now, for the first time in a while, my guest, Jim Shulman, the vice mayor in the city of Nashville, is here on the main desk with me instead of over there in a separate one.
It's nice to be back and nice to be close to you.
I think everyone's been looking forward to this. You know, I was out of town last week, but I always pay attention to the news. I was online watching everything, and the big story, you know, everything from the Ryman to the Grand Ole Opry to downtown to the games. Would you tell me a bit about what you think it was like? As far as you can tell, was it back to pre-pandemic day crowds?
I'm not. It was getting close if it wasn't already there. So even with the mask mandates and with all the restrictions, people were still coming back.
Right.
I mean, you could drive down there on a Saturday night and it was still very, very crowded.
Sure.
So now with the restrictions lifted, I know more and more people are coming back. So we're getting back to where it was before. You know, I always tell people still exercise caution, be careful. I mean, a lot of this stuff, Nick, is based upon the fact that, you know, more and more people got vaccinated. And so a lot of these places are saying, yeah, you know, CDC, you go inside if you've been vaccinated, okay, not to wear a mask. But, you know, we still have a large percentage of the state that never got vaccinated.
Still hasn't, yeah.
So, you know, it's still here, COVID. I mean, it's not one of these things. I will always say this country always seems to have a short memory span. You know, we move from one thing to the next, and then we forget. But this is still out here. We just need to everybody needs to exercise still some caution. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, I know the restrictions have been lifted, but, you know, take reasonable steps, be careful.
Right.
I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it was the CDC a few weeks back was saying even with the vaccine, maybe still wear some masks. And now, you know, the latest is that if you're fully vaccinated, no need for masks indoors or outdoors. Dr. Fauci just said, you know, we're seeing now that the vaccine, you know, is like 90% plus as we expected. Very, very protecting. And if you get it, when you've been vaccinated, it's going to be very minor. But what's crazy is, I don't know about you, I've never been a big fan, even when it's not because, oh, Nick, you're an old fart now. It's like in the old days, I just didn't care for big, crowded, smoky, loud bars. I never have. It's never been my thing. But downtown, it's jam-packed. I still get a little bit rattled. And my thing, and it's going to be a while, is I'm still not up for big crowds. I'm just not. For a lot of reasons, not just COVID, frankly. You know, I'm tired of being around a ton of people, and you can get exposed to everything from the flu to head colds to whatever. Right. I'm not there yet where I'm going to go wandering into some of these bars downtown. I never would have anyway, frankly, when they're packed. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to go to a packed Sounds game. I'm not going to go to a packed Titans game yet. That's just me. I know many others are going to say, Nick, I'm back. I'm ready to roll. I'm not.
Well, think of, I mean, during the day, what I do is I look after and take care of lots of older people in the state. They were highly at risk. Largest percentage of deaths came from that group of people. And so if those individuals have not been vaccinated or not taken steps, they still need to be careful. I mean, it's not like all of a sudden we just open up and COVID is gone. It's still floating around out there, and it may not be in the numbers that we saw. But just like everything else, like you were saying, you know, I just urge people to be careful.
Right.
We don't want any additional outbreaks. I mean, look at, you know, I was watching over the weekend, I think it was the Preakness, the Preakness Stakes, and they were advertising the Olympics. And Japan has a resurgence of COVID.
Right.
And so they're having to be very, very careful and taking all these steps. A lot of places have not opened.
Yeah.
India, just recently, I mean, remember they had that giant outburst. We, fortunately, in this country had lots of vaccines and people did get vaccinated. But not everybody did. I know they're still encouraging people to do that.
Only 30% or whatever. I know it's different, higher in some cities. I just don't get people that don't. They're afraid of the vaccine. I tell you this, I'm afraid of COVID. And even if you get it and recover, we've talked about this before, I don't know. Once you recover, and most people, if you're healthy, probably will, 10, 15 years down, what emerges from having had COVID, And that would always be in the back of my mind. I'm just so glad I didn't get it, and I am thrilled that I got the vaccine. And by the way, absolutely nothing bad happened to me. That's just it. But, I predicted this. You remember back in 2007, 2008, when we had the recession and all of that, and it took a while for things to come back. I predicted from day one that when we finally kind of emerge from this, thanks to the vaccine and the COVID takes a backseat, it was going to explode. And in Nashville, anyway, it has. And I'm not just talking about downtown. I wonder your observation between the growth, and do you realize the properties and the folks moving here and how expensive homes are now? Meaning just because people from California, everywhere, are moving here now. What is the giant draw? I mean, I know you and I both love it, but it's like the rest of the country wants to come here, it seems like, and pricing for properties through the roof.
People are fighting over, a home goes for sale and there's 20 offers for this stuff.
We are back in a rage. I mean, everything's back, and I knew it would bounce back in a hurry. Everyone's like, well, it's going to take a while. No, it is back. The economy's rolling. I mean...
No, I mean, I kind of thought like, I overall... I think this country did a pretty good job of holding it together. Now, there were a lot of small businesses impacted. A lot of people got hurt. Understand that. But the economy just didn't completely collapse. It did for some. And I don't want to forget those. Those small businesses I really do worry about. Music industry I always worry about. Right. All those restaurants. But somehow we managed to get through. I always thought, like you, that when things opened back up, the place would the businesses would, everything would explode.
Because everyone was just so hungry to get back to kind of normal and tired of being at home.
Everybody just wants to go back. Yeah. Now, what does that mean? I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with people around town about, I was in Germantown last week, and they have these townhouses that are $1 million, $2 million. It's like, what happened?
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like everything that you're looking for is just so expensive.
Right.
And the question is, how long does that last? Now, with Oracle coming in, we've got more people coming in. You've got all these people we hear are coming in from California because they want to live in Nashville. What does that mean? And it's one of those things, Nick, that I do worry about from a standpoint of an overall city perspective. We knew that, as we were growing, we knew that this might happen. As we were going through the pandemic, we were worrying about that. What do we need to do to make sure that we don't drive everybody out of this city? Because all these people are coming in. If you don't have, a couple $1 million sitting around to buy a house, where are you going to go? You're going to have to go outside the county. And I worry that, two things. One is I worry that a lack of affordable housing, a lack of the ability to live here from the standpoint of just cost of living. And then at some point, do we hit some type of point where all of a sudden it goes down?
Eventually it will. There's going to be people upside down in some of these homes because, as you say, some of these townhomes, and they're nice and they're behind the station here. If they're selling for $1 million for 1,000 square feet or whatever, that's absurd. I'm sorry. You're going to end up upside down on that sooner or later. But I'm just wondering, too, Ben Hall did a series piece last week looking at, maybe it was the week before, the investment bankers from around the country purchasing large swaths of subdivisions. And they kind of sneak in. You don't really know who's buying it. And then once they get here, they turn all of those homes into rentals. And which, again, for a lot of the people that own property there, it's not good for property values. Renters don't take the same ownership as owners do. This is the bottom line. There's many fine renters, but it's not good for a neighborhood. I wouldn't want to all of a sudden have all my homes around me become rentals. And it's happening. They come in, they just see it as a huge investment opportunity. I mean, there's not much, is there, that the city can do to address that kind of thing?
No, not really. I mean, not in that standpoint. The best the city can do, I think, is a couple things. Codes has to be on the ball, making sure that any new buildings or whatever are meeting up to standards, making sure that they're built right, making sure they follow the zoning patterns. And then the council can also zone things to make sure that there's specific planned zonings on top of things to make sure that you just don't wipe out complete neighborhoods.
Have they done that for Airbnbs? There's some regulations, right? Or I don't know who sets that for certain areas where you can't have an Airbnb be in a certain property, you know, in the middle of a neighborhood. And Airbnb is even worse than renters. You have people come in that are just there for a couple weekends, and they make a ton of noise, and they're sloppy a lot of times, and you don't want them next door. You
can put restrictions on that to stop that.
Yeah.
I think the council overall is trying to pay attention to that type of thing. The problem is okay, so where is a lot of the development right now? You see this explosion downtown. You saw it in East Nashville. You're seeing it in North Nashville. You're seeing it start moving out. The question is, in some of the outlying areas, are there enough protections out there so that we just don't get inundated?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we had this conversation maybe last time I was on here, and that was, as we're coming out of this thing, have we actually spent some time thinking about what we want the city to be? And I'm not talking about, this is a much bigger, broader review. You know, what do we want downtown to look like? How do we want everything to kind of interrelate? What about the environmental consequences? But a bigger picture, Nick, that actually showed up, it's been around, but somebody mentioned it really well in a committee that I was involved with last week. And that is, what about, it's kind of like a sustainability argument for people, okay? So it's how are we taking care of our young kids? Are we giving them the tools they need to be successful? What are the plans for the future? Are we taking care of, you know, it's one thing to build parks and all this other stuff, but what about the people of Nashville? And have we got the stuff in schools that we need? Have we got the community centers and locations that we need? Have we got daycares that are probably more designed for lower income folks to give those kids an opportunity? What are we doing? You know, we were talking about camps the other day, and there used to be lots of camps for kids. I don't know if there are, in terms of particularly kids in probably lower income neighborhoods. Yeah. Are there things for people to do? What are we doing? And have we taken a step back? Because the way this conversation started was increasing crime, particularly homicides, and trying to incarcerate less people. And a lot of people are saying that it goes back to giving people opportunities and economic chances. And where is that? Where is that in all this?
And I don't know that we take a step back, but we certainly over the last year just froze.
Yeah.
And so now that things are getting up, you're exactly right. That's what we kind of have to look at now. Where do we go from here? You know, even transit, public transportation. You talked about camps and stuff. I think I saw too that the state parks and the like are going to keep their pools closed this next year. I know that's not a metro thing, but so still everything's not completely back. But yeah, we'll talk more about that. We've got, you know, let's talk about some crime. We can talk, as always, a little bit about some property tax stuff. We've got some calls coming in, 737-7587. If you have a question or comment about about this, in the city of Nashville, which really, to me, is boomtown. There was, with Vice Mayor Jim Shulman, a report that came out last week. I think Nashville's in the top 5 nationwide for properties right now. It's just, I don't know who's ahead of us. We got to be #1. It's nuts how it's going here. And if you live here, I think you're a lucky person. We'll take a break. We'll be back with your calls and more with the Vice Mayor right after this.